The papers hit my kitchen table with a sound like a judge's gavel. Sharp. Final. Like my world was about to change forever. Mom, I need you to sign these. I looked up from my morning coffee, the first cup I'd been able to stomach since burying my husband just 5 days ago. My son stood there in his expensive suit, briefcase still in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. What are these? I asked, my voice still scratchy from crying. I've sold my shares in the business. Your portion comes out to $11,000. The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked once. Twice. Then I started laughing. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that comes when something is so ridiculous, so unbelievable, that your brain can't process it any other way. $11,000, I repeated, wiping tears from my eyes. For my share of a business worth $12 million. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom, I know this is hard, but Dad left me the controlling interest. I had to make this decision for both of us. The lawyers said this was the best offer we could get in the current market. I set down my coffee cup very carefully. Who's the buyer? Some investment company called Phoenix Holdings. That's when I smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since my husband died. Phoenix Holdings, I repeated slowly. Interesting name. He nodded, probably thinking I was going to sign without asking more questions. Like the good little wife I'd always appeared to be. Tell me, I said, standing up and walking to the window. Did you bother to research this Phoenix Holdings? Check who owns it. Of course I did. It's a legitimate company. They specialize in buying small manufacturing businesses. I turned around to face him. What's the owner's name? He fumbled with his phone. Claire Phoenix. She's based out of Delaware. The color drained from his face as the words left his mouth. I watched him realize what he'd just said. My name is Claire. Claire Morton. But my maiden name? Phoenix. Congratulations, son, I said quietly. You just sold your shares to your mother. If you felt overlooked, dismissed, or betrayed by people you trusted most, you're not alone. Sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us the deepest, but that doesn't mean we have to stay victims. Today's story shows how one woman turned devastating betrayal into complete victory. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. But let me back up and tell you how we got here. Because this story really started 8 months ago when my husband first got sick. And if you think you know how this revenge story goes, trust me, you have no idea what's coming. 8 months earlier, the phone rang while I was making breakfast. Gerald had been in the hospital for 3 days with what we thought was just a bad flu. Mrs. Morton? The doctor's voice was careful, measured. I need you to come in. We've got some test results. I knew. Even before he said the words, I knew. Cancer. Stage 4. 6 months, maybe less. Gerald took the news better than I did. He squeezed my hand in that hospital room and said, Claire, we need to talk about the business. Morton Manufacturing had been Gerald's baby for 32 years. He'd started it in our garage, building custom car parts for local shops. What began as weekend tinkering had grown into something beautiful, a company that employed 47 people and brought in over $2 million a year in profit. But more than that, it was a family. Gerald knew every employee's name, their kids' birthdays, their struggles and dreams. When Maria Gonzalez's husband died in that car accident 3 years ago, Gerald personally delivered groceries to her house every week for 2 months. When old Pete Williams needed surgery he couldn't afford, somehow a clerical error made sure his insurance covered everything. That was Gerald. That was the company he built. Blake thinks he's ready to take over completely, Gerald said, talking about our 34-year-old son. But I'm worried about what he'll do once I'm gone. I should mention here that Blake had never worked a day on the factory floor. He'd gotten his MBA from some fancy school and waltzed right into the executive office, spending most of his time on strategic planning and very little time actually understanding how the business worked. He'd walk through the factory floor like he was touring a museum, looking but not really seeing, never stopping to talk to the workers, never asking how things actually got made. He was more interested in the profit margins than the people who created them. "What are you thinking?" I asked. Gerald was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that would change everything. "I want to update my will. Make some changes to how the business gets passed down." A week later, Gerald's lawyer, Martin Webb, came to our house that Friday afternoon. Blake was supposed to be there too, but he called at the last minute saying he had an important client meeting he couldn't reschedule. Martin Webb had been Gerald's lawyer for 23 years, ever since the company got big enough to need real legal advice. He was a straight shooter, the kind of man who told you exactly what you needed to hear, whether you wanted to hear it or not. "Gerald," Martin said, spreading papers across our dining room table. "Are you sure about this structure?" My husband nodded. "Claire's been my real partner in everything for 36 years. She's got a better head for business than anyone gives her credit for." See, here's what nobody knew. While Blake was off getting his fancy degree, I was the one Gerald talked to every night about the business. I was the one who helped him figure out which clients were worth keeping and which ones were bleeding us dry. I was the one who noticed when the books didn't add up quite right. I'd grown up poor. Really poor. The kind of poor where you learn to stretch a dollar until it screams, where you know the difference between what you need and what you want. I'd worked my way through community college doing bookkeeping for small businesses, learning how money really moved through companies. But I'd always stayed in the background. The supportive wife. Never officially on the payroll, never in the boardroom. Just there. Listening. Learning. Watching. "So the new will structure," Martin said, making notes. "Blake gets 51% voting shares, but Claire gets 49% with equal management authority for any sale of the company or major asset transfers." Gerald smiled. "Exactly. Blake can run day-to-day operations, but he can't sell or gut the company without Claire's written consent. If he tries to force a sale without her signature, her shares automatically convert to preferred stock with 70% voting control." Martin raised his eyebrows. "That's comprehensive." "Blake's smart, but he's never had to fight for anything," Gerald explained. "This business needs someone who understands what it's really worth, not just in dollars, but in lives and families." I watched Martin write it all down, this insurance policy against our own son. It felt wrong, planning for Blake to disappoint us. But Gerald's instincts about people had kept the company alive for 32 years. "There's one more thing," Gerald added. "I want Claire to have access to all company financial records. Full access. Not just the summaries Blake usually provides." Martin nodded. "I'll set up the accounts so she can review everything independently." That night, after Martin left, Gerald and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset. We'd done this thousands of times over the years, but somehow I knew we wouldn't have many more. "You really think Blake would try to sell?" I asked. Gerald sighed. "I think Blake sees dollar signs where I see people. And that scares me more than dying does." 3 weeks later, while Gerald was getting weaker, I was getting busy. I incorporated Phoenix Holdings in Delaware, a completely legal shell company with myself as the sole owner under my maiden name. But I wasn't planning anything sneaky yet. This was just insurance. Gerald had shared his concerns about Blake's spending habits. Company credit cards used for personal expenses. Business trips that looked more like vacations. A pattern of treating the company like his personal bank account. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Blake had always been careless with money. Even as a kid, his allowance would disappear the day he got it, spent on candy or comic books or whatever caught his eye. We thought he'd grow out of it. We were wrong. Now that I had access to the company books, I could see patterns. Charges to high-end restaurants on nights when Blake claimed to be working late. Hotel bills in cities where we had no clients. A company credit card that seemed to follow Blake's social life more than his work schedule. If Blake tries to sell after I'm gone, Gerald told me during one of his clearer days, he'll probably shop it around to several buyers. That's when you step in. Step in how? Phoenix Holdings makes a competing offer. A better offer. Let him think he's getting a bidding war started. I stared at my husband. Even dying, he was still thinking 3 moves ahead. Gerald, that's protecting what we built together, he said firmly. Blake didn't build this company, Claire.
We did.
You and me. Every late night we spent going over the books, every tough decision we made together, every employee we helped through hard times. This company is as much yours as it is mine. I'd never thought of it that way before. I'd always seen myself as the supporter, the helper, the wife who made it possible for her husband to build something great. But Gerald was right. I'd been there for every decision. I'd helped choose which contracts to take, which employees to hire, which investments to make. I'd been a full partner in everything except the title. Maybe it was time to change that. 1 month later, that's when everything started moving fast. Blake came home from work that day with news. Gerald was barely hanging on by then, spending most of his time in the hospital bed we'd set up in our living room. Dad, I've been contacted by a company interested in buying Morton Manufacturing. Gerald's eyes, cloudy from the pain medication, sharpened immediately. What company? Titan Industries. They specialize in consolidating small manufacturers. The offer is substantial. I was sitting in the corner, supposedly reading a magazine, but I was listening to every word. How substantial? I asked. Blake pulled out a folder. $8 million. Cash deal. Gerald and I exchanged glances. Our company was worth at least $12 million, probably more. We'd done the valuations ourselves, looked at what similar companies had sold for. That's low, Gerald said weakly. It's the current market, Dad. Small manufacturers are struggling. This is a good offer. Good for who? I asked quietly. Blake turned to me with that patient expression he used when he thought I was being difficult. Mom, I know this is emotional for you, but business is business. We need to think practically.
Practically.
As if there was nothing practical about keeping 47 people employed. As if there was nothing practical about a company that had never missed a payroll, never defaulted on a contract, never left a customer hanging. That night, after Blake went home to his apartment, Gerald grabbed my hand. He's already planning to sell, he whispered. Probably been planning it for months. What do we do? You call Martin tomorrow. Tell him to activate the Phoenix Holdings plan. A week later, I called my college roommate, Catherine Lewis, who'd moved to Portland and was working as a freelance actress between theater gigs. Kat, I said, how would you like to make some easy money playing a corporate executive? She laughed. Claire, what are you up to? I explained the situation. My dying husband. My son planning to sell the family business for way under market value. The need for someone to pose as a competing buyer. This is like something out of a movie, Kat said. And you want me to be the mysterious corporate buyer? Exactly. Professional, sophisticated, just a little bit intimidating. I'm in. What's my character's background? Catherine had always been good at this stuff. In college, she talked her way into parties we weren't invited to, convinced professors to give us extensions we didn't deserve, charmed her way out of trouble more times than I could count. Over the next few days, we worked out Catherine's persona. She became Catherine Lewis, Vice President of Acquisitions for Phoenix Holdings. MBA from Wharton. 10 years experience in manufacturing acquisitions. Based in Delaware, but traveling constantly. We created an email address, a LinkedIn profile, even a company website with stock photos of impressive office buildings and corporate teams. Nothing elaborate, just enough to pass a basic background check. The key was confidence. Catherine had to sound like someone who made million-dollar decisions every day. Someone who could walk into any boardroom and belong there. "I've been studying corporate speak," Catherine told me during one of our prep calls. "I can throw around buzzwords like synergistic opportunities and vertical integration with the best of them." "Just don't overdo it," I warned. "Blake's smart enough to smell BS if you lay it on too thick." "Trust me, honey. I've been preparing for this role my whole life." The following week, Catherine called Blake's office that Thursday afternoon. "Mr. Morton? This is Catherine Lewis from Phoenix Holdings. We understand you may be considering a sale of Morton Manufacturing." Blake was immediately interested. "How did you hear about that?" "Word travels fast in our industry. We specialize in acquiring well-run family businesses. Would you be interested in hearing our preliminary offer?" Blake, thinking he now had two companies bidding for his business, agreed to a phone meeting the next day. That's when Catherine hit him with a number that would seal his fate. "Mr. Morton, based on our preliminary analysis, Phoenix Holdings would be prepared to offer $10 million for a complete acquisition of Morton Manufacturing." Blake nearly dropped the phone. $10 million was $2 million more than Titan Industries had offered. That's a very competitive offer," he managed. "We like to move quickly when we see a good opportunity," Catherine said smoothly. "How soon could we arrange a formal purchase agreement?" "Well, I need to discuss this with my business partner," Blake said. "Business partner?" That was interesting. As far as I knew, Blake owned 51% and I owned 49%. When had Gerald become just a business partner? "Of course," Catherine replied. "Who would that be?" "My mother. She holds a minority stake in the company." Minority stake. As if 49% was nothing. As if the woman who'd helped build the company from nothing was just some minor investor who needed to be handled.
I see.
Will that complicate the sale process? No, not at all. She's not really involved in business decisions. I'm sure she'll sign whatever I put in front of her. I was listening to Blake's side of this conversation from the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes. Every word felt like a knife in my back. Not involved in business decisions. Sign whatever he put in front of me. 36 years of marriage, 32 years of building a business together, and my own son thought I was nothing more than a rubber stamp. That's when I knew Gerald was right. That's when I knew Blake had to be stopped. For the next 2 weeks, Catherine played Blake perfectly. She was always just busy enough to make him wait, just interested enough to keep him hooked. "Mr. Morton, I apologize for the delay. I've been in Frankfurt closing another acquisition. But I'm pleased to say our board has approved the $10 million offer for Morton Manufacturing." Blake was practically drooling. "That's excellent news." "There is one small complication," Catherine continued. "Our legal team needs to verify ownership structure. The incorporation documents show your mother, Claire Morton, as holding a significant ownership stake. Will she need to be involved in the sale approval?" Blake's confidence faltered slightly. "Well, technically yes, but she's been grieving since my father's illness. She's not really involved in business decisions." "I understand completely. Perhaps you could handle getting her signature when the time comes?" "Absolutely. That won't be a problem." The arrogance in his voice made my blood boil. No problem at all to forge his grieving mother's signature on a $1 million deal. No problem at all to cut me out of the biggest decision in the company's history. Meanwhile, I was doing my own research. I'd hired a private investigator, a quiet woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in financial crimes. She'd been digging into Blake's activities for the past month. What she found was worse than I'd imagined. The company credit card charges were just the beginning. Blake had been systematically siphoning money from Morton Manufacturing for almost 2 years. Fake consulting contracts, inflated expense reports, equipment purchases that never happened. He'd stolen nearly $800,000 from the company. $800,000 that should have gone to employee bonuses, equipment upgrades, emergency repairs. $800,000 stolen from the people who trusted him. From his own father's legacy. I sat in my kitchen reading Sarah's report, feeling sick to my stomach. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. This was Blake systematically destroying everything Gerald had built. 2 weeks later, Gerald died on a Thursday night. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, and the last thing he said to me was, "Don't let Blake destroy what we built." The funeral was beautiful. The whole town came. Gerald had been the kind of man who remembered everyone's name, asked about their kids, helped out when times were tough. Our employees came in force. Maria Gonzalez brought her 3 children, all dressed in their best clothes. They'd made a poster with pictures of Gerald from company picnics over the years. Pete Williams, still recovering from his surgery, walked with a cane but insisted on being there. Blake gave a nice speech about continuing his father's legacy. He talked about innovation and growth and taking the company to the next level. What he didn't talk about was the 47 people who depended on Morton Manufacturing for their paychecks. Or the fact that we'd never missed a payroll in 32 years. Or how his father had personally loaned money to employees when they were struggling. The speech sounded good. Professional. Empty. After the service, people came up to me with their condolences. But they also had questions. "Mrs. Morton," said Rosa Valdez, who'd worked in our accounting department for 15 years. "What's going to happen to the company now?" "Blake says there might be changes coming," added Frank Chen, our floor supervisor. "Is everything going to be okay?" I looked at these people, really looked at them. They weren't just employees. They were Gerald's extended family. Rosa had been there when Gerald celebrated landing our first major contract. Frank had worked overtime for free when we had that rush order 3 years ago. These people had given their best years to Morton Manufacturing. They deserved better than being sold off to the highest bidder by someone who'd never appreciated what they did. "Everything's going to be fine," I told them. And for the first time since Gerald died, I meant it. The day after the funeral, Blake got a call from Catherine. "Mr. Morton, please accept my condolences on your father's passing. I know this is a difficult time." "Thank you. I appreciate that. When you're ready, Phoenix Holdings would still very much like to move forward with the acquisition. In fact, given the circumstances, we're prepared to expedite the process." Blake was ready. He'd been waiting for this moment. "Actually, I think moving forward quickly would be best. It would help my mother and me start the next chapter of our lives." Next chapter. As if Gerald's death was just a convenient excuse to cash out and move on. "Excellent. I'll have the purchase agreements drawn up immediately. We can close within a week if that works for you." "That works perfectly." "And you're confident about getting your mother's signature?" "Absolutely. She trusts my judgment completely."
Trust.
There's that word again. Blake seemed to think trust meant blind obedience. That because I'd supported Gerald for 36 years, I'd automatically support whatever Blake decided to do. He was about to learn how wrong he was. That's when Blake showed up with his papers. "I've been working on this deal for months," he explained after I'd dropped my little bombshell about Phoenix Holdings. "Phoenix Holdings contacted me back in March when Dad was really sick. They offered $10 million for my controlling shares." $10 million, I repeated. "For your 51%. Blake nodded confidently. "And your 49% share comes out to about, well, after taxes and transaction fees, about $11,000. I almost laughed again. "Blake, do you understand what you just did?" He was starting to look worried. "What do you mean?" "Phoenix Holdings. My maiden name is Phoenix. I created that company in February." Blake's face went through several colors.
Red. White.
Green around the edges. That's not possible. I've been negotiating with their representative for weeks. Catherine Lewis. I smiled. "My college roommate. She's an actress. I pay her very well to play whatever role I need." Blake stood up so fast his chair fell over. This is insane. You can't just trick me into selling you my shares. Actually, I can.
And I did.
The sale is completely legal. You signed the papers this morning. I'll fight this in court.
With what?
You just sold me your controlling interest in Morton Manufacturing. I now own 51%. Combined with my original 49%, that gives me 100% ownership. You own nothing. Blake stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Mom, this is crazy. Dad left me in charge for a reason. Really? Let's talk about why he might have done that. I walked over to my desk and pulled out a folder. The thick folder that I'd been building for months, filled with Sarah Chen's investigation results. Your father wasn't just sick these last few months, Blake. He was paying attention. And he noticed some very interesting things about the company finances. I opened the folder and spread the papers on the table. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts. Sarah's detailed report on Blake's financial activities. $47,000 charged to the company credit card at high-end restaurants. All on days when you claim to be having client meetings. Funny thing is, I called those clients. None of them remember having dinner with you. Blake's face went pale. But wait, there's more. I pulled out another section. Here's your company car expenses. A BMW worth $68,000. Except according to the GPS logs I had installed, that car spends more time at your girlfriend's apartment than it does visiting clients. Blake started to speak, but I held up my hand. Oh, we're just getting started. Remember that consulting contract you signed with Pinnacle Strategies? The one worth $200,000? Well, guess what? Pinnacle Strategies is owned by your college buddy Marcus. The same Marcus who spends most of his time playing golf and posting about it on Instagram. Blake sat back down heavily. And my personal favorite, I continued, the technology upgrade you approved last month. $350,000 to completely redo our computer systems. Except the work was done by a company that doesn't actually exist. Want to guess where that money really went? I pulled out a bank statement and slid it across the table. Your personal account. Funny how you deposited exactly $350,000 the same day that invoice was paid. Blake buried his face in his hands. Dad knew. Dad knew everything. He just didn't live long enough to confront you about it. I sat down across from my son and lowered my voice. Blake, in the 8 months since your father got sick, you've stolen over $800,000 from the company. $800,000 that should have gone to employee bonuses, equipment upgrades, and keeping this business strong. The room was completely silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Gerald had bought that clock for our 10th anniversary. He said it would remind us that time was precious, that every moment mattered. Blake had wasted so many moments, so many opportunities to be the man his father hoped he'd become. I was going to pay it back, he said quietly.
When?
After you sold your shares and walked away with $10 million. He didn't answer. Here's what's going to happen, I said, closing the folder. You're going to resign from Morton Manufacturing, effective immediately. You're going to transfer any remaining company assets back where they belong. And you're going to disappear from this business forever. And if I don't, I smiled. Then I call the police. And the IRS. And every client who ever trusted you with their business. I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Blake looked at me for a long time. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. I wasn't. What about the money I already took? He asked finally. The $10 million from the Phoenix Holdings sale? That's my money now, since I bought your shares. Consider the $800,000 you stole as an advance against your inheritance. But Blake. I leaned forward. If I ever find out you're telling people you were forced out, or that I somehow cheated you, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of son steals from his dying father's company. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I need time to think, he said. You have until tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Either you resign or I start making phone calls. Blake gathered his papers with shaking hands. At the door, he turned back to me. Mom, I never meant for things to go this far. Blake, I said quietly, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And you've been building that road for 2 years. After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on Gerald's favorite chair. For the first time since he died, I felt like I could breathe again. Blake's resignation letter was on my desk when I arrived at the office the next morning. 2 sentences long. Due to personal reasons, I am resigning from my position at Morton Manufacturing, effective immediately. I wish the company success in all future endeavors. He couldn't even bring himself to mention me by name. Couldn't acknowledge that he was resigning to the woman he'd tried to cheat out of her life's work. But that was fine. I had bigger things to worry about than Blake's wounded pride. I called an all-hands meeting for 10:30 that morning. All 47 employees crammed into our small conference room, looking worried and confused. Word had spread that Blake was gone. In a company as small as ours, news traveled fast. People were scared about what it meant for their jobs, their futures. I know you're all wondering what's going to happen now that Gerald's gone, I began. And I know there have been rumors about the company being sold. Murmurs around the room. Worried faces. These people had families to feed, mortgages to pay. They needed to know they were safe. Well, the rumors are partially true. There has been a change in ownership. The room went dead quiet. Blake has sold his shares in Morton Manufacturing. I am now the sole owner of the company. Someone in the back, I think it was Jenny from accounting, started clapping. Then others joined in. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding. I had to wipe away tears. These people weren't just clapping for me. They were clapping for stability, for the knowledge that their jobs were safe, that the company they'd helped build wasn't going to be sold to strangers who didn't understand what made Morton Manufacturing special. Now, I continued, I know some of you might be wondering if I actually know how to run this business. Laughter from the crowd. The truth is, I've been helping Gerald run it for 32 years. I just did it from the kitchen table instead of the boardroom. More laughter, but warmer now. These people had seen me at company picnics, holiday parties, the occasional office visit. They knew I wasn't some distant figurehead. So, here's what's going to change. Nothing. We're going to keep building the best custom car parts in the state. We're going to keep treating our employees like family. And we're going to keep making Gerald proud. The applause this time was even louder. But I wasn't done yet. There is one change I want to announce. Effective immediately, Morton Manufacturing is implementing a profit-sharing program. Everyone in this room who's been with the company for more than a year will receive a bonus equal to 1 week's pay for every year they've worked here. The room erupted. Rosa Valdez actually started crying. Frank Shin was shaking his head in disbelief. This bonus will be paid out next Friday, I continued. And starting next year, we'll do profit sharing annually. Because this company succeeds when all of us succeed together. After the meeting, people came up to thank me personally. But it was Rita Kowalski, our floor supervisor, who asked the question I'd been dreading. Claire, she said, I have to ask. What really happened with Blake? Rita had been with us for 18 years. She'd started as a line worker and worked her way up through sheer competence and dedication. She'd earned the right to know the truth. Blake thought he could sell his shares and walk away rich, I said. He forgot that his father didn't build this place to make Blake rich. He built it to take care of people like you.
Rita nodded slowly.
Gerald always said you were tougher than you looked. He was right. 3 weeks later, Blake showed up at my house again. This time, he looked different.
Desperate.
The expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled shirt. His usually perfect hair was messy, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Mom, I need help," he said when I opened the door. I didn't invite him in. After what he'd tried to do, he'd lost the right to casual entry into my home. What kind of help? Financial help.
I
I made some bad investments. I owe some people money. How much money? $200,000. I almost laughed. Blake, you had access to $800,000 you stole from the company. What did you do with it? His face crumpled. I thought I could make it into more. There was this investment opportunity, and Marcus said, Marcus, your golf buddy, who you paid $200,000 for consulting. Blake nodded miserably. Let me guess. Marcus convinced you to invest in some get-rich-quick scheme, and now the money's gone. It was supposed to be a sure thing. Cryptocurrency mining. He said we could triple our money in 6 months. I shook my head. Blake had always been susceptible to get-rich-quick schemes. Even in high school, he'd fallen for pyramid schemes and multi-level marketing scams, always convinced he'd found the secret to easy money. Blake, you're 34 years old. When are you going to learn that there's no such thing as easy money? I know. But, Mom, these people I owe money to, they're not the kind of people who just forgive debt. That sounds like a Blake problem, not a Claire problem. His eyes widened. You're really not going to help me? Help you what? Help you pay off gambling debts with money you should never have had in the first place. It wasn't gambling. Blake, investing money you stole in schemes you don't understand is exactly gambling. You just did it wearing a suit instead of sitting at a poker table. I started to close the door, but he put his hand up to stop it. Mom, please. I'm your son. I looked at him for a long moment. This man standing on my doorstep, begging for money to pay off debts he'd incurred with stolen funds. When had he become this person? My son died the day he decided to steal from his dying father's business. I don't know who you are anymore. This time when I closed the door, he didn't try to stop me. 2 weeks later, I was reading the morning paper when my phone rang. The caller ID said Blake Morton. I almost didn't answer. Mom? His voice sounded rough, like he'd been crying. What do you want, Blake? I'm leaving town. I wanted to say goodbye. Where are you going? Marcus has a cousin in Phoenix who might have a job for me. Sales or something. Phoenix. That's fitting. Silence on the other end. Blake, before you go, I want to tell you something. What? Your father loved you. Right up until the end. He loved you. That's why he set up the will the way he did. He was hoping you'd prove him wrong about what kind of man you'd become. More silence. You disappointed him, Blake. But more than that, you disappointed yourself. I know, he said quietly.
Do you?
Do you really know? Because it seems to me like you think this is all just a run of bad luck. Like you're the victim here. I'm not. Blake, you had everything. A successful business handed to you. Employees who respected you because they respected your father. A chance to build something meaningful. And you threw it all away because you wanted more money than you could earn honestly. Mom, I get it. I screwed up.
No, Blake.
You didn't screw up. Screwing up is when you make a mistake. What you did was make a choice. Over and over again for months, you chose to steal from people who trusted you. I could hear him crying now. But here's the thing, I continued. You're still young enough to change. You could get that job in Phoenix and work hard and be honest and build a real life for yourself. Or you could keep looking for shortcuts and end up right back where you are now. I want to change, he said. I really do. Then do it. Don't talk about it, don't promise it, just do it. And Blake, yeah, don't come back until you can look me in the eye and tell me you've earned the right to be called my son again. The phone went quiet. Then I heard him say, very softly, I love you, Mom. I love you too, Blake. That's why this hurts so much. He hung up. A month later, I got a call from Martin Webb, Gerald's lawyer. Claire, you might want to sit down for this, he said. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right. I just got off the phone with the IRS. My stomach dropped. The IRS? They've been investigating Blake's financial activities. Apparently, someone tipped them off about the money he took from the company. Someone. They wouldn't say who. But Claire, they've recovered $450,000 from various accounts Blake had hidden. Money that can be traced directly back to Morton Manufacturing. I nearly dropped the phone. $450,000? It gets better. They've also seized assets from that cryptocurrency investment Blake made. Turns out it was a Ponzi scheme, and the FBI shut it down last month. Blake's investment is being returned to him as part of the victim restitution program. How much? Another $250,000. I did the math in my head. That's $700,000. Most of what he took. Most of it. And Claire? The IRS wants to know if you want to press charges for the remaining theft. I thought about that for a long time. Blake was already living in Phoenix, supposedly working an honest job selling insurance. Pressing charges would destroy any chance he had of rebuilding his life. But then I thought about the employees he'd stolen from. Rosa Valdez, who'd had to take a second job cleaning offices at night because her pay wasn't enough to cover her mother's medical bills. Frank Chen, who'd been putting off his daughter's college fund to make ends meet. Blake's theft hadn't just hurt the company. It had hurt real people with real struggles. I want restitution, I said finally. Full restitution for everything that was taken. But I don't want him to go to prison. You sure about that? I'm sure. But Martin? Yeah. Make sure he knows how close he came to prison. Make sure he understands that if he ever pulls anything like this again, I won't be so generous. I'll make that very clear. That same week, I got another call. This one from Catherine Lewis. Claire, honey, I have to tell you something, she said, laughter in her voice. What's that? I've been getting calls. Apparently, my performance as a corporate executive was so convincing that 3 other companies have reached out to Phoenix Holdings about potential acquisitions. I laughed. Are you serious? Dead serious. One of them is offering $15 million for a manufacturing company in Ohio. Apparently, word got around that Phoenix Holdings pays top dollar and closes deals quickly. What did you tell them? That Phoenix Holdings is currently restructuring its acquisition strategy and isn't taking on new purchases at this time. But Claire, we could make a fortune if we wanted to go into the business acquisition game for real. I thought about that for a moment. It was tempting. Catherine clearly had a talent for this, and I'd learned more about business operations in the last few months than I'd thought possible. But then I looked out my office window at the Morton Manufacturing factory floor where 47 people were building something they could be proud of, earning an honest living, supporting their families. Thanks, Kat, but I think I'll stick with what I know. Though if you ever want to give up acting and become a real corporate executive, I know a manufacturing company that could use a good VP of sales. You offer me a job? I'm offering you a chance to put those negotiation skills to legitimate use. We could use someone who can talk to clients the way you talked to Blake. Catherine was quiet for a moment. You know what? That actually sounds appealing. I'm tired of waiting tables between acting gigs. Think about it. The offer stands. 2 weeks later, Catherine Lewis moved back to our town to become Morton Manufacturing's new vice president of sales and marketing. Her first act was to renegotiate 3 of our biggest client contracts, increasing our profit margins by 18%. Blake never knew that his betrayal had led to the company's most successful expansion in years. Morton Manufacturing's annual company picnic had always been held the 3rd Saturday in August. Gerald started the tradition when we only had 12 employees, and we'd kept it going every year since. This year, though, it felt different. This year, it felt like a celebration. The recovery of Blake's stolen money had allowed us to give every employee a substantial bonus. We'd also invested in new equipment, updated our safety protocols, and expanded our product line. But more than that, there was a sense of ownership among the employees. They weren't just working for a paycheck anymore. They were working for a company that they knew valued them, that they had a real stake in.
Speech.
Speech, someone called out as I stood up after dinner. I'd been dreading this moment. Gerald had always given the speech at the company picnic. He was good at it too. Funny and heartfelt and inspiring. I'm none of those things. But I stood up anyway. Gerald should be giving this speech. I started, and my voice caught a little. He should be here telling you all how proud he is of the work you do, how grateful he is for your loyalty, how excited he is about the future. I looked around at all the faces watching me. These people had become my family over the past 4 months. Since he can't be here, I'll tell you what I think he'd say. I took a deep breath. He'd say that Morton Manufacturing isn't just a business. It's a group of people who care about each other, who show up every day and do honest work and take pride in what they build. Nods around the crowd. He'd say that in a world full of companies that treat employees like numbers on a spreadsheet, we're going to keep treating people like people. And he'd say that as long as Morton Manufacturing exists, we're going to do things the right way. Even when the wrong way is easier. Even when the wrong way is more profitable. I paused, thinking about Blake. Because at the end of the day, how much money you make doesn't matter as much as how you make it. The applause started small, but it grew. By the time it ended, everyone was standing. Later, as people were packing up to go home, Rita came over to me. "Claire," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever regret it? What you did to Blake?" I thought about that question. I'd been thinking about it a lot lately. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Blake put me in a position where I had to choose between protecting him and protecting this company. But I don't regret my choice."
Rita nodded.
"Gerald would be proud of you." "I hope so." That evening, I drove past Blake's old apartment building. The windows were dark, a for rent sign hanging in the front yard. Someone else's life was starting there now. I wonder how Blake was doing in Phoenix. Whether he was really working an honest job, or whether he'd already found new shortcuts to chase. Part of me hoped he was struggling. The mother in me still wanted to protect him, to fix his problems, to make everything okay. But the businesswoman in me knew that some lessons can only be learned the hard way. 2 months later, I was in my office, Gerald's old office, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Claire, there's a call for you." Line 2. "Who is it?" "Says his name is Blake. Says he's your son." My heart started beating faster. It had been 4 months since I'd heard from him. "Put him through." I picked up the phone. "Hello, Blake."
Mom."
His voice sounded different. Steadier somehow. "How are you?"
I'm
doing okay. I wanted to call and tell you some things.
listening."
First, I wanted to say thank you. That surprised me. Thank you for what? For not pressing charges. Martin told me how much trouble I could have been in. Prison, probably. You're welcome. And second, I wanted to tell you about my life here. He told me about his job selling insurance. How he'd started at the bottom, making cold calls and getting doors slammed in his face. How he'd slowly worked his way up to where he was making enough to pay his bills and even save a little money. "It's honest work," he said. "And I'm good at it. Really good at it." I'm glad to hear that. Mom, I want you to know. I understand now. What I did to the company, what I did to Dad's memory, what I did to you. I understand how wrong it was. I close my eyes. Blake. No, let me finish. I've been going to therapy, talking about why I felt like I deserved things I hadn't earned. Why I thought shortcuts were okay as long as nobody got hurt. And what did you learn? I learned that somebody always gets hurt, even if it's just me, hurting myself by becoming someone I can't respect. I felt tears starting to form. Mom, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to come back or be part of the business again. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become the kind of man Dad raised me to be. The kind of man you deserve to have as a son. The tears were flowing now. Blake, I said, you've always been my son. Even when you were making terrible choices, even when I had to protect the business from you, you were still my son. Really? Really? And Blake, yeah, I'm proud of you. For doing the hard work, for being honest about what you did wrong, for building a real life instead of looking for another shortcut. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, do you think, maybe at Christmas, I could come visit? Not to ask for anything, just to see you? I smiled through my tears. I'd like that very much. I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. After I hung up, I sat in Gerald's chair for a long time, thinking about second chances and redemption and the long road back from betrayal. Blake wasn't there yet. Maybe he'd never fully get there. But for the first time since this whole mess started, I had hoped that my son might actually become the man his father always believed he could be. Blake arrived on Christmas Eve, just like he used to when he was in college. But this time was different. This time, he brought flowers for my table and a photo album full of pictures from his new life in Phoenix. Pictures of the small apartment he'd rented. Pictures of his coworkers at the insurance office. Pictures of himself volunteering at a local food bank. I started volunteering there because I wanted to give back somehow, he explained as we looked through the photos. But I kept doing it because it reminds me every week that there are people working 2 jobs who still can't make ends meet. It keeps me grateful for what I have. We talked until almost midnight. Really talked for the first time in years. He told me about his therapy sessions, about learning to live within his means, about the satisfaction of earning every dollar instead of taking what didn't belong to him. I told him about the changes at the company, about the new equipment we'd bought with the recovered money, about how proud Gerald would be of what we'd built. Mom, he said as he was getting ready to leave for his hotel, I need to ask you something. What? How did you know? How did you know I was going to try to sell my shares? I smiled. Blake, you never asked a single question about how the business actually worked. You never spent time on the factory floor. You never learned the names of half our employees. But you always knew exactly how much money we made and exactly what your shares were worth. He nodded slowly. I was only interested in what I could get out of it. And your father and I both knew that. That's why he set up the will the way he did. That's why I created Phoenix Holdings. We were hoping you'd prove us wrong, but we prepared for the possibility that you wouldn't. I'm sorry I didn't. Blake, the most important thing isn't that you failed the test. The most important thing is what you did after you failed it. He hugged me before he left. A real hug, not the obligatory kind we'd been giving each other for years. Merry Christmas, Mom. Merry Christmas, son. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Blake. Thank you for not giving up on me. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm going to keep working to earn back your trust. And Mom, I understand now why Dad loved that company so much. It wasn't about the money. It was about the people. Love you. I sat in my kitchen, reading that message over and over, thinking about how sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from saving the people you love from themselves. Christmas morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by pictures of Gerald and memories of the life we'd built together. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Blake had tried to cheat me out of my rightful share 8 months earlier. But today, I wasn't thinking about revenge or betrayal or even forgiveness. Today, I was thinking about Gerald's last words to me. Don't let Blake destroy what we built. I hadn't just saved the company. I'd saved my son. And maybe, in the end, that was what Gerald really meant. My phone buzzed with another text message from Blake. "Merry Christmas, Mom. I love you." I texted back, "Merry Christmas. I love you too." Some stories are about getting even. Some stories are about getting justice. Some stories are about proving you're tougher than people think. This story is about all of those things. But mostly, it's about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Blake thought wealth meant having money in the bank. Gerald and I knew wealth meant having people in your life who you could trust, and who could trust you back. In the end, I didn't just get my revenge on Blake for trying to sell his shares without considering what it would do to me or the employees. I got my son back, and that was worth more than $12 million any day. The Phoenix Holdings paperwork is still sitting in my desk drawer. A reminder that sometimes the best way to protect what you love is to be smarter than the people trying to take it away from you. Blake learned that lesson the hard way, but he learned it. And Morton Manufacturing? We're stronger than ever. 47 employees who know their jobs are safe. Equipment that actually works instead of being neglected while money gets stolen. A future that's built on honest work instead of shortcuts and schemes. But more than that, we've become something Gerald always dreamed of. A company where employees aren't just workers, they're partners. Where success is shared by everyone who helped create it. Catherine Lewis has brought in 6 new major clients in her first 6 months as VP of Sales. Rosa Valdez was promoted to Chief Financial Officer after catching 3 accounting errors that saved us thousands of dollars. Frank Chin now heads our new quality control division. These people aren't just employees anymore. They're owners, partners, family. Gerald would be proud. I know he would be proud. Because in the end, we didn't just save the business. We saved the family too. 2 weeks ago, I got another call from Blake. He'd been promoted to assistant manager at his insurance office in Phoenix. He was making enough money to move into a larger apartment, maybe even start thinking about buying a house. "Mom," he said during that call, "I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately." "What about him?" "About how he always said that the measure of a man isn't how much money he makes, but how he treats the people who can't do anything for him." "That sounds like your father." I think I'm finally starting to understand what he meant. Oh, there's this homeless veteran who comes into our office sometimes. Most people just ignore him or tell him to leave. But I started talking to him, finding out about his situation. Turns out he's been having trouble with his VA benefits, getting the runaround from bureaucrats. Blake paused. So, I spent my lunch breaks for 2 weeks helping him navigate the system. Getting his paperwork in order, making phone calls, sitting with him at appointments. That's wonderful, Blake. The thing is, it felt good. Really good. Better than any business deal I ever closed. And I realized that's what Dad felt like every day, helping people, making a difference in their lives. I had to wipe away tears. Your father would be so proud of you. I hope so. And Mom? Yes. I hope maybe someday I can come back home. Not to work for the company or anything like that. Just to be close to family again. To be part of something that matters. Blake, I said, you're always welcome home. When you're ready. Thank you.
For everything.
For not giving up on me when I gave up on myself. After that call, I walked out onto the factory floor. It was late afternoon, and the day's shift was wrapping up. I watched our employees cleaning their workstations, organizing tools, preparing everything for the next day. These people took pride in their work. They cared about quality, about doing things right. They built something beautiful here, something that would last. Rosa Valdez looked up from her desk and waved. Frank Shin gave me a thumbs up from across the floor. Catherine Lewis was on the phone with a client, probably closing another deal. This was Gerald's real legacy. Not the money, not the buildings or equipment. The people. The culture of integrity and care that he'd built into the foundation of this company. Blake had almost destroyed it. But in trying to destroy it, he'd also revealed its true strength. Because Morton Manufacturing wasn't just Gerald's company. It wasn't even Blake's inheritance or my property. It belonged to everyone who'd helped build it. Everyone who'd shown up every day and done honest work and cared about quality and treated their coworkers like family. That was the real treasure Blake had tried to steal. And in the end, it was the one thing he couldn't touch. Because you can't steal integrity. You can't purchase loyalty. You can't shortcut your way to the kind of respect that comes from doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Gerald knew that. I'd learned it. And now, finally, Blake was learning it too. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago. The grieving widow who'd sat at her kitchen table while her son tried to cheat her out of everything she'd helped build. That woman had seemed so powerless, so vulnerable. But she'd been preparing for this moment her whole life. Every late night spent going over company books. Every difficult decision made alongside Gerald. Every lesson learned about people and business and the difference between right and wrong. She'd been ready for this fight, even if she didn't know it yet. And she'd won. Not just the battle, but the war. Not just her company back, but her son's soul. Some people might call it revenge. I prefer to think of it as justice. Either way, it felt pretty good. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it, especially when we're dealing with loss and betrayal from the people closest to us. Sometimes the people we trust most can hurt us the deepest, but that doesn't mean we have to stay victims. Today's story proves that it's never too late to take control, fight back, and protect what matters most. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated you? Thanks for listening to another story from Her Real Stories. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true stories of strength, resilience, and unexpected victory. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story.